this is the click and cut right here, and I'm going to show you how to insert the mat and set the origin on the machine. To begin with, before we do it, note that there's little white rectangles across this bar that go across the machine. These white rectangles, if you look below them, you'll see the grit shaft, little, about 1.5 inches grit shafts below that. The pinch wheels need to always be over the grit shaft in order to grip the mat. And so you're going to use these white rectangles to know where to position the pinch wheels, which I'll do in just a minute. Okay. Here's the mat. Now the mat has some specific markings on here for 12 by 12. It says like 11 by 8.5 landscape, 8.5 by 11 portrait. Those are just kind of guidelines. You do not have to put your material there. You can put your material anywhere you want to on the mat because you're going to be setting an origin to tell the machine where the front right corner of the material is located. So again, you can use those if you want to, but you don't have to. But do use the grid lines for alignment so that your paper will be nice and straight. So put your paper on the mat, just use any of the grid lines to make sure that it's on there just so. And then I use a brayer to roll my material down the mat, and I do that so that I make sure I get perfect, even contact all over the material. Now you can use your hands. Just be very careful to make sure that you press it evenly over the entire surface. Now then, the mat needs to go all the way over to the right hand side so it touches this end cap. Again, this is so that you get everything lined up in the machine nice and straight. Then don't worry about how far to push it in. Just lift the levers in the back on your pinch rollers and then slide these pinch rollers so that they're under white rectangles. Now for the right one, I always use the one on the far right simply because my mat's all the way to the right. Then I will pick one of the other ones off to the left. You'll note that your far left one is probably beyond the extension of the mat. That's if you're cutting vinyl or some material where you don't need to use a cutting mat. You might want to be using one of the white rectangles off to the side. Also on the Max, there's 3 pinch rollers. I typically just use 2. You do have a third one on the Max machines if you need to use it for, if you are cutting something really wide. One thing I also didn't mention, if you have the 24-inch Max, you can actually turn your mat and use it sideways in the machine. But if you're having a class with me, be sure and tell me that you have it turned the other direction so that we can get our orientation equal. I'll understand what you're doing. Otherwise, put your mat in this direction like we did with the 13 and 15-inch machines. Okay, so I'm going to be using these two. If you're cutting from a scrap and you can't have the pinch rollers on top of the material you're cutting, then just cut a bunch of strips from printouts that you're going to be throwing in the trash, like printouts from your printer, and you might need to use those and put those down on the mat and have your pinch wheel on top of the strip. And the reason you would do that is because you don't want the adhesive from the mat getting on your pinch rollers. If you do get adhesive on it, no problem. You can clean it off with alcohol or Undo. Okay, so once I have my pinch wheels located under the white rectangles, I can drop the levers in the back. Now then, I'm going to take the test pen. Always start with the test pen until you're 100% sure you know where images are going to cut. Then bring the test pen, go ahead and touch your paper, but then lift it just a little bit. And this is important because you don't want the tip of the pen dragging as it's going from the origin over to where it's going to start drawing. And more importantly, when you start using the blade, not only do you not want the blade cutting as it's going from one point to the other to start cutting, but you want a little bit of distance for that blade holder to drop so that there's more impact when the blade hits the material that's going to be cutting. Okay? Now then, I'm going to press the green button to go offline, and then I'm going to use the plus and minus buttons. First of all, note that the top and bottom ones, move the mat in and out, and the left and right one move the blade carriage left and right. And what you want to do is bring the tip of the pen over close to the front right corner of the piece of paper. Then once you get at that location, you'll note that X and Y up here have changed. They have whatever numbers. It just shows the distances traveled from when you first turn on the machine. But before you do anything, once you get that tip of the pen over the front right corner, then press this middle button. This is the origin button. And when you press it, you'll see X and Y become 0, 0. That means you've set the origin on the machine. You've defined where the front right corner of the material you're cutting, where it's located. Now then, note that I'm not exactly at the tippity-tip part of the corner. That's okay. That's fine because I'm close to it. But note this, in my sign blank, if I have any images that are way over to the left or close to the top border, they could draw off the top of the paper or off to the left of the paper, because I'm not set right at the tippity tip corner. So just take that in mind. If you're not going to be right at the corner, make sure your images aren't too close to the borders. But then once I set the origin, then I'm ready to do my test. To do the test, you just press the test button. Make sure you're still offline. Press the test button, and it will draw or cut your little test. And if I were doing cutting, then at this point I'd lift the levers, slide out, and have a look at my test string. And so that's how you set the origin, and then there will be more videos that will show you how to go about doing your first cut.